Who hurt my daughter? Marcus Reeves's voice exploded through the classroom door like thunder. Inside, 8-year-old Lily stood frozen at the whiteboard, tears streaming down her face, while her teacher leaned over her finger, jabbing the air inches from the child's nose. You're worthless, stupid. Your dead mother would be ashamed. The words hit Marcus like bullets. His little girl trembling, broken, too terrified to even look up. 3 months of nightmares. 3 months of silence. Now he understood why. Marcus kicked open that door, and the teacher's face went white. Within hours, 200 Hell's Angels would surround this school. Subscribe now and comment your city below. Marcus Reeves woke up at 5:47 a.m. to a sound that shattered his heart. His 8-year-old daughter Lily was crying in her sleep again. 3rd time this week. 4th time if he counted Sunday night, when she'd screamed so loud the neighbors had knocked on the door to make sure everything was okay. He pushed back his blankets and walked down the narrow hallway of their small apartment, his bare feet silent on the worn carpet. The door to Lily's room was open a crack, the way she liked it now. She used to sleep with it closed, used to feel safe in the dark. That was before. Marcus stood in the doorway, watching his daughter twist in her sheets, her small hands gripping her stuffed horse so tight her knuckles had gone white. She was whimpering something he couldn't quite make out. Then he heard it. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm trying. Please don't. His chest tightened like someone had wrapped a steel cable around his ribs and started pulling. He crossed to her bed and sat down gently, putting his large, calloused hand on her back. Lily. Hey, baby girl. Daddy's here. Wake up, sweetheart. Her eyes flew open, wild and terrified, for just a moment before she recognized him. Then she launched herself into his arms, burying her face against his chest, her small body shaking with sobs she couldn't control. Daddy, Daddy, I don't want to go. Please don't make me go. Marcus held her tight, feeling her heart hammering against his chest like a trapped bird. Go where, baby? What are you talking about? School. The word came out broken, barely a whisper. Please, Daddy, I'll be good. I'll do anything. Just don't make me go to school today. Marcus closed his eyes and pressed his lips to the top of her head, breathing in the smell of her strawberry shampoo, fighting to keep his voice steady when everything inside him wanted to roar. Lily, look at me. She pulled back just enough to meet his eyes. Her face was red and blotchy, tears still streaming down her cheeks. This was his daughter. His brave, beautiful, creative little girl who used to bounce out of bed every morning excited about whatever adventure the day would bring. What happened to her? Baby, you have to talk to me. Something's wrong. Something's been wrong for months. I need you to tell me what's going on. Lily's lower lip trembled. She looked down at her stuffed horse, her fingers working nervously at its mane. I can't. Why not? Because. Her voice dropped so low he had to lean in to hear her. Because she said no one would believe me. She said if I told anyone, it would just make everything worse. The steel cable around Marcus's ribs tightened another notch. Who said that, Lily? Who told you that? Silence. Lily. Mrs. Crawford. The name came out like a confession, like something dirty she'd been carrying for too long. She says I'm stupid, Daddy. She says I'm the worst student she's ever had in 20 years. She says my drawings are garbage, and I should be embarrassed to show them to anyone. Marcus felt something shift inside him. Something cold and dangerous that he hadn't felt since his days in the Marines. What else does she say, baby? Lily's shoulders hunched inward, making herself smaller. That gesture. He'd been seeing it for months without understanding what it meant. Now he understood perfectly. She says Mommy would be ashamed of me. She says it's no wonder Mommy left, because who would want a daughter as stupid as me? The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. His wife Sarah had died of cancer when Lily was 3. She hadn't left. She'd been taken. And the thought of some teacher using Sarah's death to torture his daughter made something inside him go very, very quiet. The kind of quiet that came before a storm. Lily. His voice was calm now. Too calm. Has Mrs. Crawford ever touched you? Has she ever hit you or grabbed you? Lily nodded slowly, and Marcus felt the last thread of his self-control start to fray. She grabs my arm when she's mad. She squeezes really hard. And one time she pushed me into my desk when I got an answer wrong. She said it was an accident, but it wasn't. I saw her smile after. Marcus closed his eyes, took a breath, then another. How long has this been going on? Since October. Since I showed her my drawing of Mommy's horse, the one Mommy used to ride before she got sick. Lily's voice cracked. Mrs. Crawford said it was the worst drawing she'd ever seen. She crumpled it up and threw it in the trash in front of everyone. She said I was wasting paper and wasting her time and wasting everyone's patience. 3 months. His daughter had been suffering for 3 months while he'd been telling himself she was just going through a phase. Why didn't you tell me, baby? Why didn't you say something? Lily looked up at him with eyes too old for an 8-year-old face. Because Mrs. Crawford said parents always believe teachers over children. She said if I told you, you'd probably punish me for lying. She said that's what happens to stupid little girls who make up stories. Marcus pulled his daughter close again, holding her tight, making her a silent promise. Today, everything changes. Today, I find out the truth. And God help anyone who's been hurting my little girl. 2 hours later, Marcus stood at the kitchen counter watching Lily push Cheerios around her bowl without eating any of them. She was dressed for school in her favorite purple sweater, the one Sarah had picked out right before she got too sick to go shopping. Her backpack sat by the door packed and ready, looking like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Lily, eat your breakfast. I'm not hungry. You need to eat something, baby. She looked up at him with those big brown eyes. Sarah's eyes, and he saw the exact moment she decided to try one more time. Daddy, please. Please don't make me go. I'll do extra chores. I'll clean the whole apartment. I'll do anything. Just please don't make me go to school. Marcus set down his coffee cup and walked around the counter to kneel in front of his daughter's chair. He took her small hands in his rough ones. Lily, I need you to listen to me very carefully. You're going to school today, but I'm going to come visit you later. I'm going to bring those red velvet cupcakes you love from the bakery on Main Street, the ones with the cream cheese frosting. Lily's eyes went wide. You're coming to school. I'm coming to school, and I'm going to see for myself what's going on in that classroom. And if what you told me is true, if Mrs. Crawford has been treating you the way you said, then I promise you, baby girl, it's going to stop. Today, I'm going to make it stop. But what if she finds out I told you? What if she gets mad? Marcus cupped his daughter's face in his hands, looking directly into her eyes. Then she can get mad at me. I'm a lot harder to push around than an 8-year-old. And Lily, I need you to remember something. You're not stupid. You are the smartest, most creative, most beautiful little girl in the whole world. Your mama would be so proud of you. So proud. Don't you ever let anyone tell you different. Lily's lower lip trembled again, but this time it wasn't fear. It was hope, fragile and uncertain, like a flower trying to bloom in frozen ground. You promise, Daddy. You promise you'll make it stop. I promise, baby. Whatever it takes. Marcus dropped Lily off at the front entrance of Pinewood Elementary at 7:55 a.m. He watched her walk through those doors with her shoulders hunched and her head down, moving like someone heading to their own execution rather than their own classroom. Every instinct in his body screamed at him to follow her, to walk right into that school, find this Mrs. Crawford, and handle things the way he'd learned to handle things in the Marines. But that wasn't the play. Not yet. First, he needed to see for himself. He needed to witness what was happening with his own eyes without anyone knowing he was watching. Because if he went in there making accusations and Mrs. Crawford denied everything, it would be his word against hers. And Lily was right about one thing. Schools almost always believed teachers over parents, especially parents who looked like Marcus. He pulled out his phone and texted his foreman at the shop. Taking a personal day. Family emergency. The response came back 30 seconds later. Everything okay, Stone? That was his road name in the club, short for Stone Cold. A nickname he'd earned during his first year as a prospect when he'd faced down 3 rival bikers without flinching. It fit him. When it mattered, Marcus Reeves didn't break. It will be, he typed back. I'll handle it. He drove back to his apartment, changed into a clean flannel shirt that didn't have any club patches, and waited. Watched the clock, counted the minutes. At 1:30 p.m., he picked up the box of cupcakes from the bakery. Red velvet, Lily's favorite. Cream cheese frosting, the good kind that they made fresh every morning. At 1:45 p.m., he pulled into the Pinewood Elementary parking lot. At 1:52 p.m., he walked through the front doors. The receptionist, a pleasant woman in her 50s with reading glasses perched on her nose, looked up and did a visible double-take at the sight of him. Marcus was used to that. 6'4", 240 pounds, arms covered in tattoos. A beard that made him look like he just rolled off a Viking ship. He knew what people saw when they looked at him. He'd learned to use it when he needed to. But today he didn't need intimidation. He needed information. He gave the receptionist his warmest smile. "Afternoon, ma'am. I'm Marcus Reeves, Lily's dad. She's in Mrs. Crawford's classroom 108. Thought I'd surprise her with a little treat." He held up the bakery box. "Would it be okay if I drop these off?" The receptionist's expression softened immediately. "Oh, how sweet. Lily's such a quiet little thing. I'm sure she'll be thrilled. Down the hall, turn left. Room 108 is the third door on the right." "Thank you, ma'am. Much obliged." Marcus headed down the corridor, his work boots making soft sounds on the polished floor. Bright colors everywhere. Student artwork, alphabet letters, everything designed to make children feel safe and welcome. His daughter didn't feel safe here. His daughter had nightmares about this place. The hallway was quiet. Most classes were in session, doors closed. From one room, he heard children reciting multiplication tables. From another, a teacher reading aloud, her voice warm and engaging. Then he reached room 108. The door was closed, but there was a rectangular window at eye level. Marcus approached slowly, staying to the side, not wanting anyone inside to see him yet. He heard the voice before he saw the classroom. High, sharp, dripping with contempt. "I asked you a simple question, Lily. A 5-year-old could answer this question. What is wrong with you?" Marcus moved to the window and looked inside. 20 children sat at desks arranged in neat rows. At the front of the room, standing at the whiteboard, was a woman in her 50s, wearing a gray cardigan and sensible shoes. Her hair was pulled back tight, her posture rigid, her face twisted into an expression of pure disgust. And in front of her, standing at the whiteboard with a piece of chalk trembling in her hand, was Lily. His daughter's back was to him, but he could see everything he needed to see. Her shoulders hunched inward, her head bowed, her whole body shaking with the effort of not crying. Mrs. Crawford took a step closer, looming over the child. "Look at what you wrote. Look at it. Does that look like a correct answer to you? Does it?" No, ma'am." Lily's voice was barely audible. "Then why did you write it? Are you stupid, or are you just not trying? Which one is it?" I don't know. I'm sorry. I'll try harder." "You'll try harder. That's what you always say. But you never actually do it. Do you? You just keep making the same mistakes over and over because you don't care, because you're lazy, because you're stupid." Marcus's hands clenched into fists. The bakery box crumpled under the pressure. He watched as Mrs. Crawford grabbed the eraser and aggressively wiped away Lily's answer, then threw the eraser down on the chalk ledge so hard it bounced. "Start over, and this time try using whatever tiny brain you have in that empty head of yours." Lily's hand shook so badly she could barely hold the chalk. She started writing slowly, carefully, clearly terrified of making another mistake. She got halfway through the problem when Mrs. Crawford let out a harsh laugh. "Wrong! Again, how is this possible? How can one child be this incompetent?" She turned to the rest of the class, gesturing at Lily like she was a specimen in a museum. "Do you see this, everyone? This is what happens when you don't pay attention. This is what happens when you waste my time and everyone else's time. Lily here is a perfect example of what not to do." Marcus saw the other children's reactions. Some looked down at their desks, refusing to watch. Others sat frozen, their faces pale with fear. A boy in the front row had his hands pressed over his ears. These kids had seen this before, many times. This was routine for them. "Sit down." Mrs. Crawford's voice was cold. "You've embarrassed yourself enough for one day." Lily turned to walk back to her desk, and Marcus saw her face, tears streaming down her cheeks, eyes red and swollen. And something else, something that made his blood turn to ice. Defeat. Complete, utter defeat. The look of a child who had given up hope that anyone would ever help her. Mrs. Crawford wasn't finished. And Lily, don't even think about telling anyone about this. No one will believe you anyway. Teachers don't get in trouble for having high standards. Students get in trouble for being too weak to meet them. Your father certainly isn't going to believe some made-up story from a child who can't even do basic math. Lily sat down at her desk, hunched over, making herself as small as possible. Mrs. Crawford smiled. Actually, smiled. And Marcus Reeves, former Marine president of the local Hells Angels chapter, a man who had faced down enemy fire without flinching, felt something inside him break, then reshape itself into something far more dangerous. He didn't burst through the door. Every instinct in his body screamed at him to kick it open, grab Mrs. Crawford by her cardigan, and show her exactly what it felt like to be terrorized by someone bigger and stronger than her. But that's not what Lily needed. Lily needed her father to be smart, to be strategic, to make sure this teacher never hurt another child again. So Marcus took a breath, then another. Then he did something that required more self-control than anything he'd ever done in combat. He knocked on the door. The sound of children's voices inside went silent. He heard footsteps. Then the door opened, and he was face to face with Mrs. Vivian Crawford. She was shorter than she'd looked from the window, maybe 5'6" in her sensible shoes. But the way she held herself, the way she looked at him with barely concealed disdain, told him everything he needed to know about who she was. A bully. A coward who only picked on people who couldn't fight back. "Can I help you?" Her voice was polite, professional. Nothing like the poison she'd been spewing 30 seconds ago. Marcus held up the crumpled bakery box with his most disarming smile. "Afternoon, ma'am. I'm Marcus Reeves, Lily's dad. Thought I'd surprise her with her favorite cupcakes." Something flickered across Mrs. Crawford's face. Surprise. Then calculation. Then a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, how nice. Lily, your father's here." Lily looked up from her desk, and when she saw Marcus, something happened to her face that shattered what was left of his heart. Fear. She was afraid, not happy to see him. Afraid, because she knew he'd seen, and she was terrified of what would happen next. Marcus walked past Mrs. Crawford and knelt beside his daughter's desk. "Hey, baby girl, I brought you a surprise." Lily's eyes darted to Mrs. Crawford, then back to her father. "Thank you, Daddy." Her voice was barely above a whisper. Marcus leaned in close, so close that only Lily could hear him. "I saw everything, baby. I heard everything. It's over. She's never going to hurt you again. I promise." Lily's lower lip trembled. A fresh tear slipped down her cheek. "Daddy, please. Not here, please." Marcus squeezed her hand, then stood up and turned to face Mrs. Crawford. "Ma'am, I need to have a word with you. In private." Mrs. Crawford's professional smile stayed in place, but he saw her eyes go cold. "I'm in the middle of class, Mr. Reeves. Perhaps we could schedule a conference for later this week. It can't wait." "Excuse me." Marcus took a step closer. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't make any threatening gestures. But something in his expression made Mrs. Crawford take an involuntary step back. "I said it can't wait. I've just witnessed something that concerns me greatly, and I'd like to discuss it with you. Now, unless you'd prefer I go straight to the principal's office and file a formal complaint about what I just saw through that window." The color drained from Mrs. Crawford's face. She glanced at the window, then back at Marcus, and he watched her calculate exactly how much he might have seen. "Fine." Her voice was clipped. "Children, open your readers to page 47 and practice silent reading. I'll be right outside the door." She stepped into the hallway and Marcus followed, pulling the door mostly closed behind him. The moment they were alone, Mrs. Crawford's demeanor changed completely. The professional smile vanished. The pleasant voice disappeared. What replaced it was the same cold contempt he'd heard through the window. "What exactly do you think you saw, Mr. Reeves?" "I saw you verbally abusing my daughter. I saw you calling her stupid in front of her entire class. I saw you humiliating her and threatening her not to tell anyone." "That's ridiculous. I was simply correcting a mistake she made on the whiteboard. If Lily has characterized it differently, then she's lying. She's not lying. I heard you with my own ears. You heard me applying appropriate disciplinary standards to a struggling student. That's my job, Mr. Reeves. I have 20 years of experience teaching children. What exactly qualifies you to tell me how to do my job? Marcus felt his jaw tighten. 20 years of experience doing what? Terrorizing children, calling them stupid, telling them their dead mothers would be ashamed of them. Something flickered in Mrs. Crawford's eyes. Fear. But she covered it quickly. I don't know what Lily has told you, but children often exaggerate or misunderstand things. Perhaps she's having a hard time at home and projecting her issues onto school. Don't. Marcus's voice dropped low. Dangerous. Don't you dare try to turn this around on her. I know what I saw. I know what I heard. And I'm going to make sure it never happens again. Mrs. Crawford drew herself up, squaring her shoulders with practiced authority. Are you threatening me, Mr. Reeves? I'm promising you. There's a difference. What you've been doing to my daughter, to those other children, it ends today. I don't have to listen to this. She started to turn away. If you have concerns, you can take them up with the principal. I'm sure Dr. Monroe will explain to you how our classroom discipline policies work. Let's do that right now. Let's go to the principal's office together and I'll tell her exactly what I witnessed. Mrs. Crawford paused, turned back, and Marcus saw something new in her expression. Fear. Real fear. But she covered it with a thin smile. Fine, if that's what you want. I'm sure Dr. Monroe will support my teaching methods completely. She always has. She headed down the hallway and Marcus followed his mind, already working through what would happen next. The principal, the administration, the system that was supposed to protect children but had clearly been protecting this teacher instead. He'd seen this kind of thing before. Institutions closing ranks, officials dismissing concerns, vulnerable people getting crushed because it was easier to ignore problems than to solve them. But Marcus Reeves hadn't survived 12 years in the Marines and 15 years in the Hells Angels by accepting things the way they were. If the system wouldn't protect his daughter, he'd find another way. Dr. Patricia Monroe's office smelled like coffee and old paper. The principal was a tall woman in her late 50s with graying hair and a face that looked like it had been designed to express mild disapproval. She listened to Marcus's account of what he'd witnessed with an expression that started sympathetic and gradually became something else. Defensive, dismissive, closed. Mr. Reeves, I understand you're concerned about your daughter, but Mrs. Crawford has been teaching at this school for 20 years. She has an exemplary record. Her methods may seem strict to some parents, but her students consistently perform above district standards on standardized tests. I'm not talking about strict methods, I'm talking about abuse. She called my daughter stupid. She told her that her dead mother would be ashamed of her. She threatened her not to tell anyone. Dr. Monroe glanced at Mrs. Crawford, who stood against the wall with her arms crossed, looking like a victim rather than a perpetrator. Mrs. Crawford, would you like to respond? I never said any of those things. Her voice was calm, reasonable. I corrected Lily's work on the whiteboard and asked her to try again. I may have expressed frustration, but I certainly never used the language Mr. Reeves is describing. She's lying. Mr. Reeves. Dr. Monroe held up a hand. I understand you're upset, but accusations of this nature are very serious. Do you have any evidence other than what you claim to have seen through a window from several feet away? I know what I heard. With all due respect, you heard something through a closed door from the hallway. You may have misunderstood the context. Marcus felt his self-control slipping. I didn't misunderstand anything. I stood at that window for 5 minutes. I watched her tear my daughter apart in front of the entire class, Dr. Monroe sighed and he saw it. The dismissal, the condescension, the look that said this meeting was already over. Mr. Reeves, I think what we have here is a miscommunication. Mrs. Crawford has high standards for her students, and sometimes that can be difficult for children who are struggling. Perhaps Lily would benefit from some additional tutoring support. I'd be happy to provide some resources. I'm not leaving here until you do something about this teacher. I've heard your concerns and I've documented them. But without corroborating evidence, I can't take disciplinary action against a veteran teacher based on one parent's interpretation of a few minutes they observed through a window. Marcus stood very still. When he spoke, his voice was quiet. Other parents have complained about Mrs. Crawford, haven't they? Dr. Monroe's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes did. I'm not at liberty to discuss other parents' concerns with you. How many other parents have stood in this office and told you their children are being abused by this woman? Mr. Reeves, I think this meeting is over. This meeting is over when I get some answers. Mrs. Crawford spoke up from the wall. Dr. Monroe, I think we should call security. Mr. Reeves is clearly becoming agitated. Marcus turned to look at her, and whatever she saw in his face made her take a step back. I'm taking my daughter home. Today. Right now. And you're going to look me in the eye and tell me what you're going to do to make sure she's safe when she comes back. Dr. Monroe stood. Mr. Reeves, you're welcome to take Lily home early today. I'll have her excused from the rest of her classes, but I won't be threatened in my own office. If you have further concerns, I suggest you put them in writing and submit them through the proper channels. She moved toward the door and opened it, a clear dismissal. Marcus looked at her, then at Mrs. Crawford, then back at the principal. This isn't over. Goodbye, Mr. Reeves. He walked out of that office knowing exactly what had just happened. They'd covered for her before. They would cover for her again. The complaints, the concerns, the children who'd been broken down in that classroom, none of it mattered because protecting the institution was more important than protecting the kids. But Marcus Reeves wasn't most parents. He had resources they hadn't counted on. He had brothers. Marcus collected Lily from her classroom without looking at Mrs. Crawford. He took his daughter's hand, grabbed her backpack, and walked out of Pinewood Elementary School at 3:17 p.m. Lily didn't say anything until they were in his truck, buckled in, pulling out of the parking lot. Daddy, what happened? You talked to Mrs. Crawford and Dr. Monroe. Are they going to do something? Marcus gripped the steering wheel, staring straight ahead. No, baby. They're not. Lily's face crumpled. I told you no one would believe me. I believe you, Lily, and I'm going to make this right, but not the way they expect. He pulled out his phone and made a call. It rang twice before a familiar voice answered. Stone, what's up, brother? Ghost, I need the club. Someone hurt my daughter and the school is covering it up. I need my brothers to stand with me. There was a moment of silence on the other end. Then Vincent Ghost, Delgado, president of the Tennessee chapter of the Hells Angels, said 5 words that changed everything. Say no more. We ride. Ghost hung up the phone and stood motionless for exactly 3 seconds. In those 3 seconds, his mind processed everything Stone had said, everything Stone hadn't said, and everything that needed to happen next. Then he moved. His first call went to Tommy Bulldog Martinez, Sergeant-at-Arms, the man responsible for mobilizing the club when situations required immediate action. Bulldog answered on the first ring. Ghost, what's happening? Stone's daughter. Teacher's been abusing her. School's covering it up. We're rolling to Pinewood Elementary. Full turnout. This isn't a request. Bulldog didn't ask for details, didn't need them. The code was simple and absolute. You don't touch families. You don't hurt children. When a brother calls for support, you show up. How long do we have? 45 minutes. Get everyone moving. Say no more, brother. I'll have 50 bikes there in 30. The line went dead, and Bulldog was already dialing his next call before he'd taken his next breath. The message spread through the brotherhood like fire through dry grass. Text messages went out in group chats. Phone calls interrupted dinners, work shifts, afternoon naps. The language was simple, direct, impossible to misunderstand. Stone's daughter, school situation, Pinewood Elementary, 45 minutes, full turnout. The responses came back instantly. On my way. Rolling now. Be there in 20. Don't start without me. Across the city, men dropped what they were doing without hesitation. Bobby Wrench Santiago was elbow deep in a transmission rebuild when his phone buzzed. He read the message, wiped his hands on a rag, and called out to his assistant. Close up early, family emergency. His assistant, a young kid who'd been working at the shop for 2 years, looked up with concern. "Everything okay, boss?" "It will be." Wrench was already pulling off his coveralls, reaching for his jacket. "Lock up when you're done. I don't know when I'll be back." 3 minutes later, his Harley roared to life, joining the growing stream of motorcycles converging on the east side of town. Daniel Doc Freeman was at the hospital halfway through his shift in the pediatric ward when the message came through. He read it twice, then walked directly to his supervisor's office. "Family emergency. I need to leave." His supervisor, a woman who'd worked with Doc long enough to know he never asked for anything unless it mattered, looked up from her computer. "We're short-staffed today, Daniel. Can it wait?" "No." Something in his voice made her stop arguing. "It really can't." She studied his face for a moment, then nodded. "Go. I'll cover your patients." Doc was in the parking lot 3 minutes later, changing out of his scrubs, pulling on his riding gear. He'd treated too many broken children in his career. Kids who'd been hurt by the people who were supposed to protect them. Kids whose eyes had that same hollow look he'd seen in too many faces. Not this time. Not Stone's daughter. His bike joined the convoy heading toward Pinewood Elementary. At a construction site downtown, Raymond Hammer Cruz got the message and immediately climbed down from the scaffolding where he'd been working. His foreman saw him heading for the exit. "Cruz, where the hell you going? We got 3 more hours on this job." Raymond turned, and the look on his face was enough to stop the foreman mid-sentence. "Club business." The foreman, who'd seen that look before, knew better than to argue. "Be safe, brother." Raymond nodded once, then disappeared through the gate. In a quiet suburban neighborhood, Michael Preacher Williams was in his home office preparing Sunday's sermon when his phone rang. He listened to Ghost's voice explain the situation and felt something ancient and righteous rise in his chest. Before he'd found God, before he'd become a minister, Michael Williams had been a different kind of man. The kind who solved problems with his fists. The kind who'd spent time in places he didn't talk about anymore. But some things transcended the peaceful life he'd built. Some things demanded action. "I'll be there in 15, he said. He went to his bedroom, opened the closet, and pulled out the leather vest he hadn't worn in 3 years. His wife appeared in the doorway, watching him with knowing eyes. "Michael, a brother's daughter, teacher's been hurting her, school won't do anything." His wife nodded slowly. She'd known who he was when she married him. She'd known what he was capable of, and she'd known that some battles were worth fighting. "Go," she said. "Do what needs to be done." He kissed her forehead, walked to the garage, and fired up the Road King that had been sitting under a cover since his ordination. Some calls you don't ignore. Some fights you don't walk away from. Across the city, the same scene repeated itself dozens of times. Men leaving jobs, leaving homes, leaving whatever they'd been doing because a brother needed them, because a child had been hurt, because the code demanded it. This wasn't about violence. Every man who got that message understood that implicitly. This wasn't a show of force meant to intimidate or threaten. This was about presence, about solidarity, about making it impossible for a school administration to dismiss one father's concerns the way they dismissed so many others before. When one parent complains, they're labeled difficult, overprotective, troublemaker. When 200 bikers stand in solidarity, refusing to leave until someone answers for what's been done to children in their care, that's a different conversation entirely. Meanwhile, Marcus was driving Lily back to their apartment, his mind working through what would happen next. His phone sat in the cup holder, silent now, but he knew what was being set in motion across the city. "Daddy." Lily's voice was small, uncertain. "Who were you talking to on the phone?" "My friend Ghost. You remember him, right? He came to your birthday party last year." Lily nodded. "The man with the silver hair. He gave me the stuffed unicorn. That's him. He's going to help us, baby. Him and a lot of other friends." "Help us how?" Marcus glanced at his daughter, saw the fear and confusion in her eyes, and felt his heart twist. "Remember what I told you this morning? That I was going to make this stop?" "Yes." "Well, sometimes when you want to make something stop, you need help. You need people to stand with you, Ghost and the other men, they're my brothers. Not like real brothers, but close. Closer, maybe. And when one of us needs help, the others show up. No questions asked. Lily was quiet for a moment, processing this. Then she asked the question Marcus had been dreading. What are they going to do to Mrs. Crawford? Nothing bad, baby, I promise. They're just going to stand with me. They're going to show the school that what happened to you matters, that it can't just be ignored or swept under the rug. But what if Mrs. Crawford gets really mad? What if she tries to hurt me worse? Marcus pulled the truck over to the side of the road and turned to face his daughter fully. Lily, look at me. She met his eyes, her own red and puffy from crying. Mrs. Crawford is never going to hurt you again. Not tomorrow, not next week, not ever. After today, she's going to understand that you're not alone, that you have people who will protect you. And bullies, baby, real bullies like Mrs. Crawford, they only pick on people who can't fight back. Once she sees that you have an army standing behind you, she won't dare touch you again. You promise? I promise. On your mama's memory, I promise. Lily's lower lip trembled, and then she threw her arms around her father's neck, holding on like he was the only solid thing in a world that had been trying to break her for months. Marcus held his daughter tight and made her a silent promise. Whatever it takes, whatever I have to do, you will never feel this afraid again. They arrived at the apartment 10 minutes later. Rosa Delgado Ghost's wife was already waiting outside, her face soft with concern. Rosa was a woman in her 50s who had raised 4 children of her own and had been the unofficial mother of the club for almost 20 years. When brothers had problems, Rosa listened. When families needed support, Rosa showed up. When children were hurting, Rosa knew exactly what to do. She opened the truck door before Marcus could even turn off the engine. Lily, sweetheart, come here. Lily looked at her father uncertainly, and Marcus nodded. It's okay, baby. Rosa's going to stay with you while I take care of some things. You remember Rosa, right? Yes. Lily climbed out of the truck and let Rosa wrap her in a warm embrace. She makes the really good chocolate chip cookies. Rosa smiled, stroking Lily's hair. That's right, mi amor. And guess what? I brought all the ingredients. We're going to bake cookies together while your daddy handles some grown-up business. How does that sound? Lily glanced back at Marcus, still uncertain. Daddy, you'll come back. I'll always come back, baby. I promise. He watched Rosa lead his daughter inside, then sat in his truck for a long moment, gathering himself for what came next. His phone buzzed, a text from Ghost. 40 brothers confirmed. More coming. ETA to Pinewood, 25 minutes. Marcus typed back, I'll be there in 15. Wait for me before we go in. He started the engine and headed toward the school that had been breaking his daughter for 3 months. It was time to break something back. At Pinewood Elementary, the afternoon was proceeding normally. Students were in their final classes of the day. Teachers were watching the clock, counting down the minutes until dismissal. Mrs. Vivian Crawford was at her desk grading papers with the same rigid efficiency she brought to everything she did. The confrontation with Marcus Reeves had rattled her, but she'd convinced herself it didn't matter. Parents complained all the time. They always backed down eventually. Dr. Monroe had her back, just like she always did. This would blow over just like everything else had blown over. She had no idea what was heading her way. At 3:45 p.m., the first motorcycle pulled into the Pinewood Elementary parking lot. A black Road King with chrome pipes that gleamed in the late afternoon sun. The rider killed the engine, dismounted, and stood with his arms crossed, facing the building. Ghost had arrived. 2 minutes later, another bike appeared, then another. Then 3 arrived together, their engines synchronized in a way that only comes from years of riding side by side. Inside the school, a teacher named Jennifer Walsh was erasing her whiteboard when the rumble started. She paused, dry erase marker in hand, and looked toward the window. 1 motorcycle, 2, 5, 10. She walked to the window and watched as more bikes pulled into the lot, arranging themselves in neat rows. 20, 30, 40. Her hand went to her phone. She didn't know what was happening, but she knew it wasn't normal. Down the hall, Dr. Patricia Monroe was in her office reviewing budget reports when her phone began ringing. The first call was from a parent who lived across the street from the school. Monroe, is everything all right over there? There are motorcycles everywhere. Before the principal could answer, another call came in on the second line, then a third. Her secretary knocked on the door, face pale. "Dr. Monroe, I think you need to see this." The principal walked to the front office and looked through the glass doors. The parking lot was filling with motorcycles. 50, 60, 70, and more, coming the rumble of their engines growing louder with each passing minute. Her mouth went dry. "Call Officer Davis, now." At 4:00 p.m., Marcus arrived at the school and pulled his truck into a spot near the growing formation of motorcycles. He got out and walked toward Ghost, who stood at the front of the group, arms crossed, face unreadable. "Stone." Ghost nodded once. "We're with you, brother. Whatever you need." Marcus looked at the sea of leather and chrome behind his friend. 60 bikes, 70. More pulling in every minute. "I need them to understand that this isn't going away. That they can't just dismiss this and hope it disappears. That what they did to my daughter matters. Then that's what we'll show them." The engines kept coming. 80 bikes, 90. Students in classrooms that faced the parking lot pressed their faces to windows, eyes wide with amazement. Some of the younger children pointed excitedly at the motorcycles, thrilled by the spectacle. The older students were quieter. They sensed that this wasn't just about cool bikes. This meant something. By 4:15, there were over 100 motorcycles in the parking lot, and the sound of more approaching echoed through the neighborhood. Inside her classroom, Mrs. Crawford heard the rumble and went to her window. What she saw made the color drain from her face. Row after row of motorcycles. Men in leather vests standing beside them, arms crossed, faces hard. And at the front of the group, unmistakable even from this distance, stood Marcus Reeves. For the first time in 20 years, Vivian Crawford felt a cold knot of fear form in her stomach. She grabbed her phone and called the office. "Get me Dr. Monroe. Now." Officer Ray Davis, the school resource officer, emerged from the building and approached the group of bikers carefully. He was a veteran cop with 20 years on the force, and he knew how to read situations. This wasn't a threat. These men weren't here to cause trouble. This was a statement. He found Marcus at the front of the group. "Mr. Reeves, I heard you were in earlier today. Want to tell me what's going on?" Marcus's voice was calm, steady, and absolutely firm. "My daughter was abused by her teacher, Officer Davis. I witnessed it personally. The administration tried to dismiss it as a miscommunication. We're here to make sure that doesn't happen." Davis looked at the sea of motorcycles. 120 now. More arriving every minute. "You planning any violence, property damage?" "No, sir, we're just standing here waiting for someone to take responsibility for what's been happening to children in this school." Davis nodded, slowly processing the situation. "I'm going to need you to stay peaceful and let the school handle their business." "That's exactly what we're doing, officer. We're just making sure they actually handle it this time." By 4:30, the parking lot held over 150 motorcycles. The sound of engines had become a constant rumble that echoed off the school building and rolled through the surrounding neighborhood. Residents came to their porches to see what was happening. Cars slowed as they passed. The local news station had already received 3 calls about the gathering. Inside the school, Dr. Monroe stood in the front office, phone pressed to her ear, watching the crowd grow. "Yes, I understand. Yes, I'm aware of the situation. No, there hasn't been any violence. They're just standing there." She hung up and turned to her secretary. "Call the district office, let them know what's happening. And find Mrs. Crawford. I need to speak with her immediately." Mrs. Crawford was already on her way, having watched the gathering from her classroom window until she couldn't stand it anymore. She burst into the office, her usual composure cracked. "What is happening? Why are there bikers in our parking lot?" Dr. Monroe's expression was tight. "It appears to be related to the situation with Mr. Reeves this afternoon." "This is insane. He can't do this. This is harassment. This is intimidation. We need to call the police." "Officer Davis is already out there. He says they're not doing anything illegal. They're just standing in the parking lot." Standing in the parking lot? There are 100 motorcycles out there. This is clearly meant to threaten me. "Mrs. Crawford, please lower your voice." "I will not lower my voice. That man is trying to destroy my career over a simple disciplinary interaction with his daughter. This is completely inappropriate." Dr. Monroe looked at her for a long moment. Mrs. Crawford, Mr. Reeves made some very serious allegations this afternoon. He claims he witnessed you verbally abusing his daughter, calling her stupid, referencing her deceased mother. That's a lie. I never said any of those things. He seemed very certain of what he heard. I don't care how certain he seemed. He's wrong. Or he's lying. I've been teaching for 20 years, Patricia. 20 years without a single disciplinary action on my record. Dr. Monroe's expression flickered and Mrs. Crawford caught it. What? Nothing. There have been other complaints, Vivian, over the years. Parents who've expressed concerns about your methods. And you've always supported me. You've always told them they were overreacting. I have. But this, she gestured toward the window, toward the sea of motorcycles and men. This is different. This man isn't going away. He's brought an army to make sure we can't ignore him. Mrs. Crawford's face hardened. Then we call our lawyers. We file restraining orders. We have him arrested for trespassing. They're not trespassing. The parking lot is public property during school hours. Then we wait them out. They'll get bored eventually. They'll leave. Dr. Monroe looked out the window at the rows of motorcycles, at the men standing motionless beside them, at Marcus Reeves planted at the front like a statue of vengeance. I don't think they're going anywhere. Outside, the count had reached 175 motorcycles. Men continued to arrive, park in formation, and take their positions. Ghost moved through the group, checking in with brothers, making sure everyone understood the plan. No violence, no threats, no property damage. We stand. We wait. We make it impossible for them to ignore us. The men nodded. They understood. At 4:45, the first news van pulled up to the edge of the parking lot. A reporter and cameraman climbed out, immediately recognizing the scale of what was happening. This wasn't just a story about a parent-teacher conflict anymore. This was something bigger. The reporter approached Officer Davis first. Officer, can you tell us what's happening here? You'll have to ask them. Davis nodded toward the group of bikers. They say they're protesting the school's handling of a child abuse complaint. The reporter's eyes widened. Child abuse. Alleged child abuse. That's all I know. The camera swung toward the motorcycles, capturing the rows of bikes, the men in leather, the sheer overwhelming presence of 200 people standing in silent solidarity. By 5:00 p.m., 2 more news vans had arrived. Reporters were setting up shots, trying to get interviews, attempting to understand what was unfolding. And then something unexpected happened. A woman emerged from the school, walking directly toward Marcus and the group of bikers. She was in her 30s, professional clothes, tear streaks visible on her face. She stopped in front of Marcus and spoke loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. Are you Lily's father, the one who confronted Mrs. Crawford today? Marcus nodded. I am. My name is Angela Torres. My son is in Mrs. Crawford's class. He's been terrified of school for 3 months. I've complained to Dr. Monroe 4 times. She told me I was overreacting. She told me my son was just having trouble adjusting. Her voice broke, but she pushed through. I watched Mrs. Crawford call my son worthless in front of the whole class. I reported it. Nothing happened. She told him if he said anything, no one would believe him. She said the same thing to your daughter, didn't she? Marcus felt something shift in his chest. Yes, she did. Angela Torres turned to face the news cameras that had gathered to capture the scene. Mrs. Crawford has been abusing children in this school for years. The administration knows about it and does nothing. We've complained, we've begged, we've pleaded, and they've told us we're wrong. They've told us our children are liars. They've protected that woman while our kids suffer. She turned back to Marcus, her eyes fierce with a mother's righteous anger. Thank you. Thank you for not backing down. Thank you for bringing people who will stand with you. Because the rest of us were too scared to do what you're doing. Behind her, other parents began emerging from the school. Not to complain about the bikers. Not to demand they leave. To add their voices to the chorus. One by one they came forward, sharing their stories, naming their children, describing what Mrs. Crawford had done to them and how the school had dismissed their concerns. David Chen, whose daughter had nightmares every night. Sarah Martinez, whose son had started wetting the bed again. Robert Williams, who'd pulled his daughter out mid-year because the school refused to act. The news cameras captured it all. The testimony, the tears, the rage of parents who had been silenced for too long. And behind them, 200 motorcycles stood in silent witness to everything the school had tried to bury. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. The crowd had grown to include not just bikers, but parents, neighbors, concerned citizens who had heard what was happening and come to see for themselves. Inside her office, Dr. Monroe watched the scene unfold through her window phone pressed to her ear, listening to the district superintendent's increasingly panicked voice. "This is a disaster. This is an absolute disaster. Why wasn't I informed about these complaints earlier? I handled them according to protocol." The parents were satisfied with our responses. They clearly weren't satisfied, Patricia. There are 200 bikers in your parking lot and 3 news crews broadcasting live. This is going to be on every channel tonight. What exactly am I supposed to tell the school board? Dr. Monroe had no answer. In her classroom, Mrs. Crawford sat alone in the gathering darkness, watching the news vans and the motorcycles and the parents who had finally found the courage to speak. 20 years. 20 years of being untouchable. 20 years of doing whatever she wanted to children who were too scared to fight back. And now, because of one father who refused to look away, it was all coming apart. She picked up her phone and called her union representative. "I need a lawyer. I need one right now." Outside, Marcus stood at the front of the formation, watching the parents share their stories with the news cameras, watching the crowd grow, watching the school administration realize they couldn't make this disappear. Ghost appeared at his shoulder. "You did good, brother. You started something here." Marcus shook his head. "I didn't start anything. I just refused to let them finish what they started. These parents, these kids, they've been fighting this battle alone for years. All I did was show them they don't have to fight alone anymore." Ghost nodded, looking out at the sea of motorcycles and the crowd of supporters. 200 brothers showed up for you today, Stone. 200 men dropped everything because your daughter needed help. You know what that means. It means I'm grateful. It means you're family, and family doesn't let family fight alone, ever." Marcus looked at the school building, at the windows where administrators watched with growing fear, at the classroom where Mrs. Crawford sat in the dark, contemplating her crumbling career. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. But for the first time since Lily had woken up crying in the middle of the night, Marcus Reeves felt something he hadn't felt in months. Hope. The engines rumbled, the cameras rolled, the parents spoke their truth. And in an apartment across town, Lily Reeves pulled a tray of fresh-baked cookies from the oven and smiled for the first time in weeks. She didn't know exactly what her father was doing. She didn't understand the full scope of what was happening at her school. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. Her daddy had promised to make it stop, and her daddy always kept his promises. The news reporter from Channel 7 stepped in front of her cameraman and began her live broadcast as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the 200 motorcycles that filled Pinewood Elementary's parking lot. "I'm standing outside Pinewood Elementary School, where an extraordinary scene is unfolding tonight. What started as one father's confrontation with school administrators over alleged child abuse has grown into a massive demonstration of solidarity. Behind me, you can see nearly 200 members of a local motorcycle club who have gathered to support Marcus Reeves, a father who claims he witnessed a teacher verbally abusing his 8-year-old daughter earlier today." She turned slightly, gesturing toward the crowd of parents who had gathered near the bikers. But perhaps more significantly, other parents have come forward with their own allegations against the same teacher. "We're hearing claims that span years, accusations that school administrators knew about the abuse and did nothing. This story is developing rapidly, and will bring you updates throughout the evening." Inside the school, Dr. Patricia Monroe watched the broadcast on her phone, her face pale, her hands trembling. The district superintendent had called 3 times in the last hour, the school board president twice. A lawyer from the district's legal team was on his way. Everything she'd spent 23 years building was crumbling in real time. Her secretary knocked on the door. "Dr. Monroe, there are more parents arriving. They're asking to speak to you. Tell them I'm unavailable. They're saying they won't leave until you come out." Monroe closed her eyes and took a breath. When she opened them, she saw Mrs. Crawford standing in her doorway, looking nothing like the confident, commanding teacher she'd been that morning. "Patricia, you have to do something. You have to make this stop." "What exactly would you like me to do, Vivian?" "There are news cameras out there. There are 200 bikers who aren't leaving. There are parents sharing stories that I apparently should have listened to years ago." "Those stories are lies. Those parents are exaggerating. I've never abused any child." "Then why are there so many of them? Why are they all saying the same things?" Mrs. Crawford's face hardened. "Because parents talk. They conspire. They feed off each other's hysteria. One person makes an accusation and suddenly everyone remembers things that never happened. Vivian Marcus Reeves says he watched you through the window. He says he heard you call his daughter stupid. He says you referenced her deceased mother. He's lying. Why would he lie? What possible reason would he have to fabricate something like this and then bring 200 people to back him up? Because he's a biker, a criminal. He's probably done this before. Intimidation is what these people do." Dr. Monroe stared at her for a long moment. "I've known you for 15 years, Vivian. I've defended you against every complaint that's ever crossed my desk. I've told parents they were overreacting. I've protected your career over and over again." "As you should have. I'm an excellent teacher." "Then why do I suddenly feel like I've been protecting the wrong person?" Mrs. Crawford's expression flickered. Surprise, then anger, then something that looked almost like fear. "You're going to throw me under the bus. After everything I've done for this school, you're going to sacrifice me to appease a mob." "I'm going to do what I should have done years ago. I'm going to listen to the parents. I'm going to investigate their claims properly. And if what they're saying is true, Vivian, then I'm going to make sure you never step foot in a classroom again." Mrs. Crawford's face went white. "You can't do that. I have tenure. I have union protection. You can't just fire me based on accusations. Watch me." Outside, Marcus stood with Ghost and Bulldog watching the crowd continue to grow. What had started as 200 bikers had expanded to include hundreds of community members. Parents, neighbors, concerned citizens who had seen the news coverage and come to bear witness. Angela Torres approached Marcus, her eyes red from crying, but her voice steady. "More parents are coming forward. I've counted at least 12 families who have stories about Mrs. Crawford. 12 families, Mr. Reeves. 12 families who were told they were wrong, who were told their children were lying, who were made to feel crazy for trying to protect their kids." "Have they talked to the reporters?" "Some of them. Others are scared. They're worried about retaliation, worried the school will find ways to punish their children." Marcus nodded slowly. "Tell them they don't have to be scared anymore. Tell them we're not leaving until this is resolved. Tell them their voices matter and we're here to make sure those voices are heard." Angela looked at the sea of motorcycles, at the men standing silently beside them, at the crowd that had gathered in solidarity. "Why?" she asked quietly. "Why did you do all this? You could have just taken your daughter out of the school. You could have moved on." Marcus met her eyes. "Because moving on doesn't help the kids who can't move. Because ignoring the problem doesn't make it go away, it just makes it someone else's problem. Because my daughter spent 3 months being tortured by that woman while I told myself everything was fine. I failed her. I'm not going to fail her again. And I'm not going to let that teacher fail any other child either." Angela reached out and squeezed his arm. "Thank you. From all of us. Thank you." At 6:30 p.m., a black SUV pulled into the parking lot, navigating carefully through the rows of motorcycles. A man in an expensive suit climbed out, briefcase in hand, and made his way toward the school entrance. Ghost watched him pass. "District lawyer. They're bringing in the big guns." "Good," Marcus said. "That means they're taking this seriously. Or it means they're preparing to fight dirty. Let them try. We've got truth on our side." And we've got 200 witnesses who aren't going anywhere. Inside the school, the district lawyer, a man named Harrison Webb, sat down in Dr. Monroe's office and opened his briefcase. Let me be clear about the situation we're facing. We have a teacher with 20 years of tenure and no formal disciplinary actions on her record. We have one parent who claims to have witnessed abuse through a window. We have a group of other parents making accusations that have never been formally documented. And we have 200 bikers who are essentially holding our school hostage. Dr. Monroe leaned forward. Those accusations were documented, Mr. Webb. They just weren't acted upon. Excuse me. I have files, complaint forms, notes from parent conferences, going back at least 8 years. Parents have been raising concerns about Mrs. Crawford's methods for nearly a decade. I've been dismissing those concerns and telling parents they were overreacting. Webb's expression tightened. Why wasn't I informed of this before? Because I didn't think it was relevant. I thought I was protecting a good teacher from oversensitive parents. And now, Dr. Monroe looked out her window at the crowd that had gathered at the news cameras, at the faces of parents who had finally found the courage to speak. Now, I think I was protecting a predator from her victims. Webb was silent for a long moment. Then he spoke carefully. If what you're saying is true, if there's documentation showing that the district was aware of these complaints and failed to act, we're looking at massive liability. Lawsuits. Criminal charges potentially. This could bring down more than just one teacher. I know. Including you. I know that too. Webb studied her face. What do you want to do? Dr. Monroe stood and walked to the window. Outside, Marcus Reeves stood at the front of the formation, surrounded by his brothers, surrounded by parents who had finally found their voices. I want to do the right thing. For once in my career, I want to actually protect the children instead of protecting the institution. That's admirable, but it's also potentially career-ending. My career ended the moment I chose to ignore those complaints. I just didn't know it yet. She turned back to face the lawyer. I want to suspend Mrs. Crawford immediately pending a full investigation. I want to bring in an independent team to interview every child who's been in her classroom over the past 5 years. I want to contact every parent who ever filed a complaint and apologize personally. And I want to stand in front of those cameras and admit that we failed. Webb's eyebrows rose. The district won't like that. The district can fire me if they want, but I'm done protecting people who hurt children. I'm done being part of the problem. Outside, the crowd stirred as the front doors of the school opened. Dr. Monroe emerged, flanked by Officer Davis, and walked directly toward Marcus and the group of bikers. The news cameras swung to capture the moment. Parents fell silent. The rumble of idling engines seemed to quiet. Dr. Monroe stopped in front of Marcus and looked him directly in the eyes. Mr. Reeves, I owe you an apology. Marcus didn't respond, just waited. Earlier today, I dismissed your concerns. I defended a teacher who didn't deserve defending. I failed your daughter, and I failed every other child who's been hurt in that classroom. She turned to face the crowd of parents who had gathered. I failed all of you. For years, you came to me with concerns, and I told you that you were wrong. I protected a teacher's career over your children's well-being. That was inexcusable, and I'm sorry. Angela Torres stepped forward. Sorry doesn't undo what our children went through. You're right, it doesn't. But I can tell you what I'm going to do next. Mrs. Crawford has been suspended effective immediately. She will not return to the school while the investigation is ongoing. An independent team will be brought in to interview students and review the complaints that were filed over the years. And I will personally ensure that every family affected by this situation receives the support they need. The crowd murmured, some skeptical, some hopeful, all waiting to see if these were just words or if real action would follow. Marcus spoke for the first time. How do we know you'll follow through? How do we know this won't just get buried like everything else? Dr. Monroe met his gaze steadily. Because I'm going to make sure it doesn't. I'm going to be transparent about every step of this process. I'm going to invite parent representatives to be part of the investigation. And if the district tries to protect Mrs. Crawford or sweep this under the rug, I'll be the first one standing in front of those cameras telling the world exactly what they're doing. Why should we trust you? You've been covering for her for years. You shouldn't trust me, not yet. Trust has to be earned, and I haven't earned it. But I'm asking for the chance to try. I'm asking for the opportunity to make this right. Ghost stepped up beside Marcus, his voice carrying across the crowd. Words are easy, lady. Actions are what matter. We'll be watching. If you don't follow through, we'll be back. And next time, we'll bring more than 200. Dr. Monroe nodded slowly. I understand. And I'll prove to you that I mean what I say. She turned and walked back toward the school, and Marcus watched her go, trying to decide if he believed her. Bulldog appeared at his shoulder. What do you think, Stone? Is she for real? I don't know. But she just suspended Crawford on live television. She just admitted the school failed. She just promised transparency and parent involvement. If she doesn't follow through, she's destroyed herself for nothing. So we wait. We wait. But we don't leave. Not until Crawford is officially off school property. Not until we see action, not just words. At 7:15 p.m., Mrs. Vivian Crawford was escorted out of Pinewood Elementary School by Officer Davis. She emerged from the side entrance trying to avoid the cameras, but the reporters had anticipated the move. They swarmed toward her microphones, extended questions flying. Mrs. Crawford, do you have any comment on the allegations against you? Mrs. Crawford, is it true that you've been abusing students for years? Mrs. Crawford, how do you respond to parents who say their children are terrified of you? She said nothing. Head down. Face pale, she walked quickly toward her car, flanked by Officer Davis, who kept the reporters at a distance. As she passed the row of motorcycles, 200 pairs of eyes tracked her movement. 200 men stood in silent judgment, watching the woman who had terrorized children finally face a fraction of the consequences she deserved. Mrs. Crawford reached her car, fumbled with her keys, and finally managed to unlock the door. Before she climbed in, she looked back at the crowd, at the motorcycles, at Marcus Reeves standing at the center of it all. Their eyes met. Marcus didn't say a word. Didn't need to. His expression said everything. You're done. You're never going to hurt another child again. And you're going to spend the rest of your life knowing that this is what you deserve. Mrs. Crawford got in her car and drove away, and the crowd erupted in cheers. Marcus didn't cheer. He just stood there watching the taillights disappear, thinking about all the children who had suffered while he'd been telling himself his daughter was just going through a phase. Ghost appeared beside him. It's over, brother. You did it. It's not over. Not yet. Crawford's been suspended, but she hasn't been fired. The investigation hasn't even started. There's still a lot that could go wrong. But today was a victory. Today you showed an entire community that they don't have to accept abuse, that they can stand up and fight back. That one voice can become 200 voices when it matters. Marcus looked at the crowd of parents who had gathered, at the children who had come with their families to bear witness, at the brothers who had dropped everything to stand with him. I didn't do this alone. I couldn't have done this alone. That's the point, Stone. You're not alone. You never were. You just had to be willing to ask for help. At 7:45 p.m., as the crowd began to disperse and the news crews started packing up their equipment, Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from Rosa. Lily wants to talk to you. She saw the news. She knows what happened. Marcus's heart clenched. He hadn't wanted Lily to see any of this. Hadn't wanted her to know the extent of what he'd done. He typed back, I'm on my way. He said goodbye to his brothers, thanking each one personally for showing up. Bulldog, Wrench, Doc, Preacher, Hammer, Ghost. 200 men who had dropped their lives to stand with him because a child had been hurt and the code demanded action. You ever need anything, Ghost said as Marcus climbed into his truck, and I mean anything you call. Doesn't matter what time. Doesn't matter what it is. Your family, Stone. Always. I know, brother, and I'm grateful. He drove home through streets that seemed different somehow. Lighter, cleaner. Like a storm had passed and left everything washed fresh. When he walked through the apartment door, Lily was sitting on the couch with Rosa, a half-eaten cookie in her hand and an expression on her face that Marcus couldn't quite read. Hey, baby girl. Lily set down the cookie and looked at her father with eyes that seemed older than they had that morning. Daddy, I saw you on TV. I saw all the motorcycles. I saw the other parents talking about Mrs. Crawford. Marcus sat down beside her and took her small hand in his large one. What did you think? I think... Lily paused, searching for the right words. I think I was scared at first. There were so many people, and Mrs. Crawford looked really mad when she came out of the school. Were you scared of her? Lily shook her head slowly. No, that's the weird part. I wasn't scared of her at all, because you were there. And all those other people were there. And she looked so small, Daddy. She looked so small walking to her car. I've never seen her look small before. Marcus felt his throat tighten. She is small, baby. She's a bully, and bullies only seem big when they're hurting people who can't fight back. The moment they face someone who stands up to them, they shrink. Is she going to come back to school? I don't think so, baby. Dr. Monroe said she's suspended. That means she can't teach anymore while they investigate what she did. What about the other kids, the ones who are still in her class? Marcus looked at his daughter and felt a surge of pride. Even after everything she'd been through, she was thinking about the other children, about the kids who might still be suffering. They're going to be okay, Lily. Because of what happened today, a lot of parents found the courage to speak up. They're going to make sure no one else gets hurt. Because of you. Because of all of us. Because you were brave enough to tell me what was happening. Because I was brave enough to go see for myself. Because my brothers showed up when I asked for help. Because other parents finally told their stories. It took a lot of people being brave, baby, including you. Lily was quiet for a moment. Then she asked the question Marcus had been dreading. Daddy, why did Mrs. Crawford hate me so much? What did I do wrong? Marcus pulled his daughter into his arms and held her tight. You didn't do anything wrong, Lily. Not one single thing. Mrs. Crawford is a broken person. Something inside her is twisted and mean, and she takes out her anger on children because children can't fight back. It had nothing to do with you. Nothing to do with how smart you are or how good you are. She would have done the same thing to anyone she thought she could get away with hurting. But she said I was stupid. She said my drawings were garbage. She said Mommy would be ashamed of me. She lied. About all of it. You are the smartest, most creative, most amazing little girl I've ever known. Your drawings are beautiful, and your mama, his voice cracked. Your mama would be so proud of you, Lily. So incredibly proud. She's watching you right now from heaven, and she's proud of how brave you were and how strong you are. Lily buried her face in her father's chest and started to cry. Not the desperate, terrified tears of that morning, but something different. Something that felt like release, like relief. Like the first crack in a dam that had been holding back too much for too long. Marcus held his daughter and let her cry, and he cried too. For the months of suffering he hadn't seen. For the pain he hadn't been able to prevent. For the little girl who had been broken down by someone who was supposed to teach her to nurture her, to help her grow. And for the healing that could finally begin. Rosa slipped out quietly, closing the door behind her, leaving father and daughter alone with their grief and their gratitude. When Lily finally stopped crying, she looked up at her father with red-rimmed eyes. Daddy, yes, baby. Thank you for believing me, for fighting for me, for not giving up. Marcus kissed the top of her head. I will never give up on you, Lily. Never. You are the most important thing in my life, and I will always, always protect you, no matter what. I love you, Daddy. I love you too, baby girl, more than anything in this world. They sat together on the couch, holding each other, as the night deepened outside their window. In the distance, Marcus could hear the occasional rumble of a motorcycle brothers heading home after a long day of standing in solidarity. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The investigation, the media attention, the long process of healing and rebuilding. But tonight, in this moment, a father and his daughter had found something precious. Peace. And the knowledge that no matter what came next, they would face it together. 3 days after 200 motorcycles filled the Pinewood Elementary parking lot, Marcus Reeves received a phone call that changed everything. He was in his garage working on a transmission repair when his phone buzzed. The number was unfamiliar, but he answered anyway. Mr. Reeves. This is Detective Sarah Mitchell with the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation. I need to speak with you about Vivian Crawford. Marcus set down his wrench and wiped his hands on a rag. I'm listening. We've opened a criminal investigation based on the allegations that have come forward. I'd like to meet with you and your daughter to get your statements on record. Would tomorrow morning work? Criminal investigation. What kind of charges are we talking about? Child abuse, potentially multiple counts depending on what the investigation uncovers, Mr. Reeves. Based on the number of families who have come forward in the past 72 hours, this case is much larger than anyone initially realized. Marcus felt something shift in his chest. 3 days ago, he'd been fighting to get anyone to take him seriously. Now the state was involved. How many families? 23 so far, and more are calling every day. 23 families. 23 children who had suffered in that classroom while the school looked the other way. Tomorrow morning works fine, Detective. What time? 9 o'clock. I'll text you the address. He hung up and stood there for a long moment processing what he'd just heard. 23 families. How many more were out there? How many parents had given up, moved their kids to other schools, and tried to forget what had happened? How many children were still carrying the scars of what that woman had done to them? His phone buzzed again, a text from Angela Torres. Have you seen the news they found more victims? Not just from Pinewood, from her previous school too. Marcus's blood went cold. He walked inside and turned on the television, flipping to the local news channel. The anchor was mid-sentence. The investigation into former Pinewood elementary teacher Vivian Crawford has expanded significantly. Sources tell us that investigators have now identified potential victims at Crawford's previous school, where she taught for 12 years before transferring to Pinewood. Parents from that school are now coming forward with allegations dating back over a decade. The screen showed a photo of Mrs. Crawford looking nothing like the confident bully who had terrorized his daughter. She looked older, smaller, defeated. Good. In related news, Pinewood Elementary Principal Patricia Monroe has announced her resignation effective immediately. In a statement released this morning, Monroe said she takes full responsibility for failing to act on multiple complaints against Crawford over the years. The district superintendent has announced that an independent review of all personnel policies will be conducted in response to this scandal. Marcus turned off the television and sat down heavily on the couch. Monroe had resigned. Crawford was facing criminal charges. The district was being forced to examine how they'd allowed this to happen for so long. 3 days ago, he'd been a single father trying to figure out why his daughter was afraid of school. Now he was at the center of a story that was tearing apart an entire educational system. His phone rang again. Ghost. Stone, you watching the news? Just saw it. It's bigger than we thought, brother, a lot bigger. I've been getting calls all morning from chapters in other states. This story went national. Parents everywhere are reaching out asking how we organize the demonstration, asking if we can help them do the same thing in their communities. Marcus rubbed his forehead. I didn't want this to become a movement. I just wanted to protect my daughter. I know. But sometimes protecting one kid means protecting all of them. What happened at Pinewood wasn't unique, Stone. It's happening in schools everywhere. Teachers who abuse their power, administrators who cover it up, parents who get ignored and dismissed. You showed people that they don't have to accept it, that they can fight back. I didn't do it alone. No, you didn't. And that's the point. When people stand together, they can't be ignored. When communities demand accountability, systems have to change. What you started, brother, it's spreading. And it's going to keep spreading until schools everywhere understand that protecting children has to come first. After Ghost hung up, Marcus sat in silence, trying to process everything that was happening. He'd spent 12 years in the Marines, fighting enemies he could see. He'd spent 15 years in the club, facing down threats he understood. This was different. This was a battle against something bigger than one teacher or one school. This was a fight against a system that had been failing children for decades. And somehow, without meaning to, he'd become the face of that fight. A small voice interrupted his thoughts. Daddy, are you okay? He looked up to see Lily standing in the doorway, her stuffed horse clutched in her arms, concern written across her face. "I'm okay, baby. Just thinking." She walked over and climbed onto the couch beside him. "I heard the TV. They were talking about Mrs. Crawford." "Yeah, they were. A lot of people are talking about her now." "Is she going to jail?" Marcus considered how to answer. "I don't know yet, baby. The police are investigating. If they find enough evidence that she hurt children, then yes, she might go to jail." "Good." Lily's voice was firm. "She should go to jail. She was mean to a lot of kids, not just me." "I know, baby." "Daddy, why do some grown-ups hurt kids? I don't understand. Kids are smaller. Kids can't fight back. Why would someone want to hurt someone who can't fight back?" It was the question Marcus had been asking himself for days, the question he didn't have a good answer for. "I don't know, Lily. Some people are broken inside. Something happened to them that made them mean and angry, and they take that anger out on people who are weaker than them. It's not right. It's never right. And it's the job of the rest of us to protect people from those kinds of broken people. Like you protected me. Like I protected you. And like all those other parents are going to protect their kids now that they know the truth." Lily was quiet for a moment, processing. Then she asked a question that surprised him. "Daddy, can I write a letter?" "A letter to who?" "To the other kids, the ones who Mrs. Crawford hurt. I want to tell them it's not their fault. I want to tell them they're not stupid. I want to tell them what you told me, that Mrs. Crawford was wrong about everything." Marcus felt his throat tighten. After everything she'd been through, his daughter's first thought was about helping other children who had suffered like she had. "I think that's a beautiful idea, baby. I think those kids would really like to hear from you." That afternoon, while Marcus watched, Lily sat at the kitchen table with a piece of paper and a purple crayon, carefully writing her letter. "Dear friends," she wrote, her handwriting wobbly but determined. "My name is Lily. Mrs. Crawford was mean to me too. She said I was stupid. She said my drawings were garbage. She said my mommy would be ashamed of me. But she was wrong. My daddy told me she was wrong about everything. You are not stupid. You are smart and brave and good. Don't believe the mean things she said. Believe the people who love you. Love, Lily." When she finished, she looked up at her father with a small, proud smile. "Is it good, Daddy?" Marcus had to swallow hard before he could answer. "It's perfect, baby. It's absolutely perfect." The next morning, Marcus and Lily arrived at the TBI office at 9 o'clock sharp. Detective Mitchell was a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a kind voice. She led them to an interview room and spent the next 2 hours carefully documenting everything Lily could remember about her time in Mrs. Crawford's classroom. Lily was brave. She answered every question honestly, even when it hurt. She described the names she'd been called, the time she'd been grabbed, the day her drawing of her mother's horse had been crumpled and thrown away. When she talked about Mrs. Crawford telling her that her dead mother would be ashamed of her. Detective Mitchell's jaw tightened. "That's everything, sweetheart. You did so well. I'm really proud of you." Lily looked at her father. "Daddy said being brave means doing hard things even when you're scared. I was scared, but I did it anyway." "You absolutely did. And because of you and your daddy, a lot of other children are going to be protected." After Lily was taken to wait with a victim advocate, Detective Mitchell turned to Marcus. "Mr. Reeves, I need to tell you something. This case is larger than anything we've seen in this state in a long time. We've identified at least 37 potential victims across 2 schools over a period of 15 years. Mrs. Crawford was protected by administrators at both institutions. She was moved from her first school to Pinewood after complaints started piling up, but there was never any disciplinary action. They just shuffled her to a new school, let her start over with fresh victims. That's exactly what they did. It's a pattern we see too often. Problem teachers get moved instead of fired. Schools prioritize avoiding scandal over protecting children. The system failed these kids repeatedly. What happens now? We're building a case for multiple counts of child abuse. We're also looking at potential charges against administrators who knew about the abuse and failed to act. This could result in criminal charges against several people, not just Crawford. Marcus thought about Dr. Monroe, who had resigned and admitted her failures, about the superintendent who had been scrambling to contain the fallout, about all the people who had known what was happening and done nothing. Good. They all should face consequences. I agree, Mr. Reeves. I also want you to know that your actions, what you did at the school, it made this investigation possible. Before you showed up with those motorcycles, parents were isolated. They thought they were alone. They thought no one would believe them. You changed that. You gave them the courage to come forward. I just wanted to protect my daughter. You did, and you protected a lot of other children in the process, whether you intended to or not. 2 weeks later, Vivian Crawford was arrested at her home and charged with 23 counts of child abuse. The news covered it live, showing her being led out in handcuffs, her face a mask of disbelief and rage. Marcus watched the coverage with Lily beside him. When Crawford's face appeared on screen, Lily didn't flinch, didn't look away. She watched with calm, steady eyes. She looks scared, Daddy. She is scared, baby. She's finally facing consequences for what she did. Good. Now she knows what it feels like. Marcus looked at his daughter, at the strength she'd found in the past 2 weeks, and felt a surge of pride so intense it almost hurt. Yeah, baby. Now she knows. The arrest was just the beginning. Over the following weeks, the case against Crawford expanded. More victims came forward. More evidence was gathered. The district superintendent resigned under pressure. 2 assistant principals were placed on administrative leave pending investigation. The story went national, then international. News outlets from around the world covered the tale of a biker father who had stood up against a corrupt system and won. Marcus was interviewed by major networks, though he deflected most of the attention. I'm not a hero, he said in interview after interview. I'm just a dad who refused to let his daughter be hurt. Any father would do the same. But not every father had done the same. That was what made the story resonate. Parents everywhere recognized themselves in Marcus's struggle. They'd faced the same dismissive administrators. They'd been told the same things about their children. They doubted themselves when they should have trusted their instincts. Marcus's story gave them permission to fight back. Parent groups formed in communities across the country, inspired by what had happened in Tennessee. They demanded transparency from their schools. They pushed for cameras in classrooms. They advocated for policies that prioritized children's safety over institutional reputation. The Hells Angels chapters nationwide began partnering with child advocacy organizations. What had started as one club supporting one brother evolved into a broader mission. Chapters showed up at school board meetings. They stood with parents confronting abusive systems. They leveraged their collective presence to ensure families weren't dismissed or ignored. Ghost called Marcus one evening with news that made him sit down. Stone, you're not going to believe this. The national organization just voted to make child protection an official part of our mission. Every chapter, every state, we're all committing to standing up for kids who are being hurt by the people supposed to protect them. Are you serious? Dead serious. Your daughter changed everything, brother. What happened to Lily? What you did about it, it reminded us all why we wear these patches. It's not just about brotherhood. It's about protecting the vulnerable. It's about standing up when everyone else is looking away. Marcus felt something swell in his chest. Pride, gratitude, hope. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. Just keep being the father you are. The rest of us will follow your example. A month after Crawford's arrest, Marcus received an envelope in the mail with no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper with handwritten words. Mr. Reeves, you don't know me, but I was in Mrs. Crawford's class 12 years ago. I've spent my whole life thinking I was stupid because that's what she told me every day. I've struggled with anxiety and depression. I've had trouble holding jobs because I never believed I was good enough. When I saw what happened on the news, when I heard other parents telling the same stories I remembered, I broke down crying. For the first time in my life, I understood it wasn't my fault. She was wrong about me. Thank you for showing me that. Thank you for finally stopping her. I'm getting help now. I'm starting to believe I might actually be worth something. You saved more than the children in that school. You saved the children who grew up and never knew why they were so broken. God bless you and your daughter." Marcus read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down his face. He thought about all the children Crawford had hurt over 15 years. Children who had grown into adults carrying wounds they didn't understand. Adults who thought they were fundamentally flawed because a broken woman had told them so when they were too young to know better. How many of them were out there? How many lives had Crawford damaged beyond the ones they knew about? He folded the letter carefully and put it in his pocket. He would keep it forever. A reminder of why this fight mattered. A reminder that the ripples of what they'd done were spreading further than they could ever know. That evening, Marcus and Lily had dinner together at their small kitchen table. Spaghetti with meatballs, Lily's favorite. She ate with an appetite he hadn't seen in months, chattering about her new school, about the friends she was making, about the art project she was working on. "Daddy, my teacher says I'm really good at drawing. She put my picture on the bulletin board, the one I drew of you and the motorcycles." "That's amazing, baby. I'm so proud of you." "She's nice, Daddy. Mrs. Patterson. She never yells at anyone. When someone makes a mistake, she just helps them fix it. She says mistakes are how we learn." "That's how teachers should be, Lily. That's how they're supposed to treat children." "I know that now. I didn't know it before. I thought Mrs. Crawford was normal. I thought all teachers were like her. I'm sorry you had to learn the hard way that some adults aren't good people." Lily considered this for a moment, twirling spaghetti around her fork. "I'm not sorry. Well, I'm sorry it happened, but I learned something important. I learned that you have to speak up when something's wrong, even if you're scared, even if you think no one will believe you, because sometimes they will believe you, and sometimes they'll help you fight." Marcus looked at his daughter, at the wisdom in her 8-year-old eyes, and felt his heart overflow. "When did you get so smart, baby girl?" Lily grinned. "I was always smart, Daddy. Mrs. Crawford was just wrong." He laughed, really laughed for the first time in what felt like forever. "Yeah, baby, she was wrong about everything." After dinner, they sat on the couch together watching a movie about a princess who saved her kingdom by being brave enough to speak the truth. Lily fell asleep halfway through, her head on her father's shoulder, her breathing soft and peaceful. Marcus sat in the darkness, his daughter warm against his side, and thought about everything that had happened. 3 months ago, Lily had been a terrified little girl who believed she was worthless, who flinched at sudden sounds, who apologized for existing. Now she was drawing again, laughing again, making friends, raising her hand in class, believing in herself. The road ahead was still long. Crawford's trial was coming. There would be testimony, media attention, painful memories dragged back into the light, but they would face it together, father and daughter, surrounded by brothers who would stand with them, supported by a community that had finally found its voice. Marcus kissed the top of Lily's head and whispered words she was too deeply asleep to hear. "I love you, baby girl, and I will never let anyone hurt you again. Never." Outside, a motorcycle rumbled past on the highway, a distant reminder of the brotherhood that had stood with them when they needed it most. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new battles, new opportunities to protect children who couldn't protect themselves. But tonight, in this moment, Marcus Reeves held his sleeping daughter and felt something he hadn't felt in a very long time. Peace. Real, lasting, hard-won peace. And the absolute certainty that whatever came next, they would face it together. 6 months after Vivian Crawford's arrest, Marcus Reeves sat in the front row of a crowded courtroom, watching the woman who had terrorized his daughter face judgment. Crawford looked nothing like the confident bully who had once stood over 8-year-old children and called them worthless. Her hair had gone gray. Her face was gaunt. Her eyes, which had once burned with cruel authority, were hollow and afraid. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s, reviewed the documents in front of her before speaking. "Mrs. Crawford, you have been found guilty on 31 counts of child abuse spanning a period of 15 years at 2 different schools. The evidence presented in this trial has been overwhelming and deeply disturbing. You systematically targeted vulnerable children, broke down their self-esteem, and used your position of authority to terrorize those who were too young and too scared to fight back. Crawford's lawyer placed a hand on her arm, but she didn't react. She just stared straight ahead as if she couldn't believe this was really happening. What makes your crimes particularly egregious, the judge continued, is that you operated within a system that was supposed to protect these children. You exploited the trust that parents placed in educators. You exploited the power imbalance between adults and children. And when parents tried to report your behavior, you relied on institutional protection to silence them. Marcus felt Lily's hand slip into his. She had insisted on being here for the sentencing, had insisted on watching the woman who had hurt her face consequences. "I'm not scared, Daddy," she had told him that morning. "I want to see." So here they sat, father and daughter, watching justice unfold. The court has considered your age, your lack of prior criminal record, and the arguments made by your defense counsel. However, the court has also considered the lasting damage you inflicted on dozens of children, many of whom continue to struggle with the psychological wounds you caused. The judge's voice hardened. This court sentences you to 15 years in state prison, with the possibility of parole after 10 years. You are permanently banned from working with children in any capacity. And it is the hope of this court that your case serves as a warning to anyone who believes they can abuse children with impunity. Crawford's face crumpled. Her lawyer grabbed her arm as she swayed. 15 years. Her voice was a whisper of disbelief. I was a teacher. I dedicated my life to education. This isn't fair. The judge's expression didn't change. What wasn't fair was what you did to those children, Mrs. Crawford. Court is adjourned. The gavel came down. Crawford was led away in handcuffs, and Marcus watched her go with a satisfaction he didn't feel guilty about. 15 years. It wasn't enough. Nothing would ever be enough to undo the damage she'd caused. But it was something. It was acknowledgement that what she'd done was wrong. It was proof that the system could work when enough people demanded accountability. Lily tugged on his hand. Daddy, is it over now? Marcus looked down at his daughter. She was 9 now, taller than she'd been 6 months ago, with a strength in her eyes that hadn't been there before. Yeah, baby. It's over. Outside the courthouse, a crowd had gathered. Parents from both schools where Crawford had taught, members of the Hells Angels who had stood in that parking lot, reporters who had covered the story from the beginning, advocates who had taken up the cause. Angela Torres pushed through the crowd and embraced Marcus tightly. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for not giving up. Thank you for starting this. We all did it together, Angela. But you were first. You were the one who showed us it was possible to fight back. Behind her, David Chen and Sarah Martinez and Robert Williams and a dozen other parents waited to shake Marcus's hand, to thank him, to tell him what his courage had meant to their families. Ghost appeared at his shoulder, grinning broadly. You did it, brother. You actually did it. We did it. I couldn't have done any of this without the club. That's what brothers are for. You called, we came. That's how it works. Ghost looked at Lily, who was accepting a flower from one of the other children. How's she doing? Better every day. She's drawing again. She's got friends at her new school. She's starting to believe in herself. And you? Marcus considered the question. I'm proud of her. I'm grateful for everyone who helped us, and I'm ready for whatever comes next. What does come next? I don't know exactly, but this fight isn't over. Crawford is going to prison, but there are other teachers like her out there, other schools covering up abuse, other children suffering in silence. This was just one battle in a much bigger war. Ghost nodded slowly. The club's with you, Stone. Whatever you need, wherever this takes you, we're with you. The crowd eventually dispersed, and Marcus drove Lily home through streets that felt different than they had 6 months ago. Lighter, more hopeful. Daddy, Lily's voice was thoughtful. What's going to happen to all the kids Mrs. Crawford hurt? They're getting help, baby. Counselors, therapists, people who understand what they went through and can help them heal. Will they be okay? Some of them will. Some of them will struggle for a long time. But at least now they know the truth. They know it wasn't their fault. They know they're not stupid or worthless. That's important, Lily. Knowing the truth is the first step to healing. Like me. Like you, baby. You know the truth now. You know how special you are. Lily smiled, and it was the smile Marcus had been missing for so long. Open, unafraid, full of the joy that every child deserved to feel. I want to help them, Daddy, the other kids. I want to help them know they're not alone. How do you want to do that? I've been thinking about it. Remember the letter I wrote, the one you helped me share with the other families? A lot of them wrote back. They said it helped them. They said knowing someone else understood made them feel better. I remember. I want to do more. I want to write more letters. Maybe talk to kids who are going through what I went through. Tell them it gets better. Tell them they're brave for speaking up. Marcus glanced at his daughter at the determination on her young face and felt his heart swell. I think that's a wonderful idea, baby. We can figure out how to do that together. Promise. Promise. Over the following months, Lily became an unexpected voice in the movement her father had started. At first, it was just letters. Handwritten notes to children who had been identified as victims in the Crawford case, telling them they weren't alone, that what happened wasn't their fault, that they were stronger than they knew. Then a reporter asked if Lily would be willing to share her story publicly. Marcus hesitated, worried about exposing his daughter to more attention, more scrutiny. But Lily insisted. Daddy, if my story can help other kids, I want to tell it. I was scared for so long because I thought no one would believe me. If I can show other kids that someone will believe them, maybe they won't have to be scared as long as I was. So Lily told her story, carefully with Marcus by her side with child psychologists, ensuring the process wouldn't cause additional trauma. The interview aired nationally and sparked an outpouring of response. Parents contacted news stations with their own stories. Children who had been suffering in silence found the courage to speak up. Schools across the country faced renewed scrutiny about how they handled abuse complaints. What Marcus had started Lily was helping to grow. 1 year after the demonstration at Pinewood Elementary, the family advocacy group that Angela Torres had founded, now called Lions for Our Children, held its first national conference. Over 500 parents, educators, advocates, and community members gathered to discuss how to protect children from institutional abuse. Marcus was invited to speak. He stood at the podium looking out at a sea of faces. People who had traveled from across the country because they believed in what this movement represented. People who had faced their own battles with schools and administrators. People who refused to accept that children's safety was less important than institutional reputation. A year ago, Marcus began, I was just a father trying to figure out why my daughter was afraid of school. I didn't set out to start a movement. I didn't plan to become an activist. All I wanted was to protect my little girl. He paused, gathering his thoughts. But what I learned is that protecting one child often means protecting all children. Because the systems that failed my daughter weren't unique to one school or one teacher. They exist everywhere. Schools that prioritize reputation over safety. Administrators who dismiss parent concerns. Teachers who abuse their authority because they know no one will stop them. His voice grew stronger. I also learned that these systems can change. They have to change. And they will change when we demand it. Not one parent alone. Not one family fighting in isolation. But communities standing together. Parents refusing to be silenced. Children learning that their voices matter. He looked out at the crowd, at the faces of people who had traveled thousands of miles to be here. My daughter Lily taught me something important. She taught me that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing the right thing even when you're terrified. She was scared to tell me what was happening at school. But she did it anyway. And because she was brave, a lot of other children are safer today. The work we're doing here, the advocacy and the policy changes and the community organizing it matters. But it starts with one simple act. It starts with listening to our children, believing them when they tell us something is wrong, fighting for them even when the systems tell us we're overreacting. That's what I did for Lily. That's what every parent in this room has done for their children. And that's what we're going to keep doing until every child in every school is safe from the people who would harm them. The applause started slowly, then built to a roar. 500 people on their feet, united in a common cause. In the front row, Lily sat with Ghost and Rosa, her small face glowing with pride as she watched her father. Later that evening, the conference held a dinner reception. Marcus stood with Lily, accepting congratulations and shaking hands when a man he didn't recognize approached them. He was in his late 20s, tall and thin, with nervous eyes and hands that wouldn't stop moving. "Mr. Reeves, I'm sorry to bother you, but I had to come. I had to thank you in person." "Thank me for what?" The young man took a breath, steadying himself. "I was in Mrs. Crawford's class, not at Pinewood. At her first school 15 years ago, she destroyed me, told me I was worthless every single day for an entire year. I believed her. I've spent my whole adult life believing her." His voice cracked. "When I saw the news, when I heard what you did, I broke down. For the first time in my life, I understood it wasn't my fault. She was wrong about me. She'd been wrong about all of us." Tears streamed down his face, but he kept talking. "I've been in therapy for 6 months now. I'm learning to believe that I actually have value. That I'm not the stupid, worthless kid she told me I was. And it's because of you. Because you didn't give up. Because you showed the world what she really was." Marcus reached out and gripped the young man's shoulder. "What's your name, son?" "By Michael. Michael Torres." "Michael, you're not worthless. You never were. That woman was a monster who hurt children because she could get away with it. The things she told you were lies. All of them." Michael nodded, wiping his eyes. "I know that now. But for 20 years I didn't. For 20 years I thought the problem was me." Lily stepped forward and looked up at the crying man. "You're brave." Michael blinked. "What?" "You're brave," Lily repeated. "My daddy says being brave means doing hard things even when you're scared. Getting help is hard. Telling your story is hard. But you did it anyway. That makes you brave." Michael stared at the 9-year-old girl who had spoken with such simple certainty. Then he knelt down to her level. "Thank you, Lily. You're pretty brave yourself." "I know," she smiled. "My daddy told me." Marcus watched the exchange, feeling something shift in his chest. This was why it mattered. Not the conferences or the policy changes or the national attention. This. One person helping another. One survivor telling another survivor that they weren't alone. This was the real legacy of what they'd done. 2 years after the demonstration at Pinewood Elementary, Marcus received a phone call that brought the whole journey full circle. "Mr. Reeves, this is Dr. Amanda Chen, principal at Riverside Elementary. I wanted to let you know that Lily has been nominated for our Young Leader Award. She's been mentoring younger students who are struggling, and several teachers have noted the positive impact she's had on children who are going through difficult times." Marcus felt his eyes sting. "That's wonderful, Dr. Chen. I'm very proud of her." "You should be. She's a remarkable young woman. But I also wanted to tell you something else. This year, we implemented the Safe Schools initiative that your foundation helped develop. Cameras in classrooms, anonymous reporting systems, regular wellness checks for students. Because of those changes, we've identified and addressed 3 situations that might have otherwise gone unnoticed. 3 situations. 3 children who were struggling, 2 with problems at home, 1 with a teacher who was using inappropriate discipline methods. In each case, we intervened early. In each case, the outcome was positive. That's because of you, Mr. Reeves, because of what you and Lily started." After he hung up, Marcus sat for a long time thinking about the ripples that spread out from a single stone dropped in still water. 3 children. 3 children who might have suffered the way Lily had suffered. 3 children who were helped because one father refused to accept that his daughter's pain was normal. And beyond those 3, how many others? In schools across the country, parents were demanding accountability. Administrators were being held responsible. Teachers who abused their authority were being stopped before they could do lasting damage. All because one father showed up at his daughter's school with cupcakes and witnessed something he wasn't supposed to see. That evening, Marcus and Lily had dinner at their favorite restaurant to celebrate her nomination. She was 10 now, confident and bright, with her mother's smile and her father's stubborn determination. "Daddy, can I ask you something?" "Always, baby." "Do you ever think about that day? The day you came to my school and saw Mrs. Crawford? All the time? What do you think would have happened if you hadn't come?" Marcus considered the question carefully. "I don't know, Lily. Maybe someone else would have eventually stepped up. Maybe the truth would have come out some other way. Or maybe you'd still be in that classroom, still being hurt, still thinking you were worthless. I'm glad you came. Me too, baby. More than you'll ever know." Lily was quiet for a moment, then spoke again. "Daddy, I want to be like you when I grow up." "What do you mean?" "I want to help people who are scared. I want to be brave for people who can't be brave for themselves. I want to make things better." Marcus reached across the table and took his daughter's hand. "You already do, Lily. You already make things better, every single day." She smiled, and in that smile Marcus saw everything that mattered. The healing that had happened, the strength she had found, the future she would build. He'd spent 12 years in the Marines learning how to fight, 15 years in the club learning how to protect his brothers. But the most important lesson he'd ever learned came from an 8-year-old girl who was brave enough to tell the truth. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply show up. Show up for your children. Show up for your community. Show up for the people who can't fight for themselves. Marcus had shown up at that school with nothing more than cupcakes and a father's instinct that something was wrong. He'd had no plan, no strategy, just the absolute certainty that his daughter needed him. And from that simple act, everything had changed. Crawford was in prison. The administrators who had protected her were gone. Schools across the country had implemented protections that would save countless children from suffering in silence. Lily was thriving. She was helping others. She was becoming the person she was always meant to be before a broken woman tried to convince her she was worthless. And Marcus, the biker father who had never wanted to be a hero, had learned that sometimes heroism isn't about grand gestures or dramatic confrontations. Sometimes it's just about refusing to look away. As they drove home that night, Lily fell asleep in the passenger seat, her face peaceful in the glow of passing streetlights. Marcus looked at his daughter and felt a gratitude so deep it almost hurt. She was going to be okay. Better than okay. She was going to change the world. And somewhere in heaven, Sarah was watching them both, proud of the man Marcus had become and the woman Lily was becoming. The road stretched out ahead, full of possibilities. There would be more battles to fight, more children to protect, more systems to change. But whatever came next, they would face it together. Father and daughter, survivor and advocate. A family that had been broken by cruelty and rebuilt by courage. Marcus reached over and gently squeezed Lily's hand. She stirred but didn't wake, a small smile crossing her sleeping face. "I love you, baby girl," he whispered, "and I'm so proud of who you're becoming." The motorcycle rumbled softly in the distance, a brother heading home after a long day. The sound reminded Marcus of that afternoon at Pinewood Elementary when 200 engines had roared in solidarity for one little girl. That day had changed everything. Not because bikers showed up at a school, but because a father believed his daughter. Because a community stood together. Because ordinary people refused to accept that children's pain was someone else's problem. That's how change happens. Not through grand speeches or political movements. Through simple acts of courage. Through parents who listen. Through communities who show up. Through children who find their voices and adults who make sure those voices are heard. Lily Reeves had found her voice, and because of her countless other children would find theirs too. That was the legacy of one father's love. That was the power of showing up. That was the beginning of something that would never end. If you believe one person can make a difference, if you believe communities have the power to protect their children, if you stand against anyone who abuses power over the vulnerable, then you understand why this story matters. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to this channel for more stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. And remember, when it comes to protecting children, silence is never an option. The ones who matter most are counting on us to speak up, to show up, to never look away. Because that's what love demands, and that's what courage looks like.